Hello, I'm Colin Gallagher, CEO at Onward and Upward, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Association Insights podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Henning. Today we're talking about transformation, not the kind that happens overnight, but the kind that's rooted in clarity, courage, and deep commitment to mission. I'm joined today by Stephanie Simpson, Chief Executive Officer, and Derek Neal, Chief Operating Officer of the Association for Middle Level Education, also known as AMLE. AMLE is the only international organization dedicated exclusively to middle school educators. With over 35,000 members strong, they're the go-to source for peer-reviewed research, professional development, and everything it takes to support the unique needs of young adolescents. But over the past 5 years, this team has led one of the most inspiring turnarounds we've seen, growing net assets by 90%, launching new programs, rebuilding trust, and setting a bold new vision for the future. Today, we'll dive into what that journey looks like behind the scenes and what other association leaders can take away from their experience. So, Stephanie and Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
So, let's start with the big picture. For those who may not be familiar, what can you share a bit about who AMLE serves and what makes middle level education such a vital and unique part of the broader education system?
I'm really pleased you asked that and gave us an opportunity to share a little bit about what makes those awkward tweens so amazing and incredible. Our members often, when they say they're middle school teachers or principals, get that, why? God bless your heart. Why would you do this? But really, it's just such a phenomenal age group. 10 to 15-year-olds are experiencing the second most rapid development other than birth to age 3. And we call it the last best chance at AMLE because it's when if kids eventually drop out of high school, they've started thinking about that at 6th grade. It's when we often either keep or lose their engagement in school. So it is just such a critical linchpin when these kids are developing abstract thinking, starting to consider their future options. We need to keep them engaged in school and excited to be there.
Yeah, I think Stephanie nailed it there. One of the things I like to joke about is, we're kind of here for two different types of members. We're here for the members that are 100% bought into middle level education and everything Stephanie just said, and they know, the value that middle level education has. And then we're also here for the member that feels like they got stuck in middle school and, just desperately trying to find resources to help them deal with, what these 10 to 15-year-olds are going through. So, we have a very vital role for both of those very different groups of people. And I think that's why it makes AMLE so valuable.
I think that's great. I am the mother of a 13-year-old daughter, so 8th grade. And one of the things that that sort of surprised me is, when you first have a child, they give you the book of like what to expect and you have all of this. And then when you get to middle school, they don't. And I did hear from my middle school teachers, like, oh, their brain is developing and it's not done developing. And this is so echoing both what you just said. And I think that that's like so interesting because as a parent, it wasn't really readily known to me, but it thankfully was known to their middle school teachers. So I'm happy about that. So AMLE has been around for over 5 decades. But just a few years ago, you found yourselves at a crossroads. Can you talk to me about what was happening at the start of that journey and what made you realize a major transformation was needed?
Yeah, so I feel like, having been around for so long, we've had our highs and our lows. There were great years where the association was really growing. We had some strong leadership. And we, developed some core resources that we still, use today in, a varied format. But, over, the 5 to 10 years prior to, Stephanie coming on board as CEO, we had kind of relied on those resources, hadn't developed a whole lot of new resources or things for educators, and just kind of had become stagnant. We had seen, losses for the 5 years leading up to 2019 when Stephanie came on board. And we're really in a rough spot financially. It was just time for a change, time for some new leadership. We had always been kind of managed in a way that it was, trying to cut our way into success instead of developing new things. So that worked for a while, trying to save on, expenses and things like that. But there was really nothing new to offer. So that's, in 2019, when we started looking for a new executive director, CEO role, we kind of made that, we need somebody with fresh ideas to come on board. So
I think that's great. And I also think, like, I love when I hear associations say, like, we were at a crossroads and we were, you know, looking at things that weren't working and we decided to change, because I do think that in the association world, that is a lot harder than it sounds. So I think that that is like such a smart piece of information to be able to say, like, we need to be looking for outside, like, new leadership with new fresh eyes. So I feel like that's a really great point. So every turnaround has a moment where a team decides we have to do something different. And what was that moment for you? And what were some of the very first steps you took to stabilize both financially and operationally?
Yeah, this is not to talk about myself, but the board, I think, recognized that they had always been led by an educator as their executive, and they chose instead an association management professional. And so I think they finally realized that this role, obviously our members and having them at the table and them as leaders, is so important to setting the vision for the organization, but they needed to bring in association expertise to actually make that vision a reality. So I give them a lot of credit, because that can be really hard to make that shift and to trust somebody who's not from your profession to lead your organization. And so they gave that trust to me, and I'm so grateful to them for having given me that opportunity. So I think that was a huge step for the board, was deciding to make a change in what they were looking for in their executive leader. And then the second was, I think you had mentioned that, sometimes in associations, we just kind of keep doing the same thing over and over and again and kind of bleed that stone until it just doesn't work anymore. And instead we said, we need to act fast and we need the board to trust us quickly to do that. And so I started coming up on 7 years ago, but we were about 4 months out from our annual conference. And I think that there could have been a temptation to let's just get through this conference and then we'll do some strategic thinking, or then we'll make a shift. And we said, no, we have to do this now. We have to try new things. We have to look at every contract, talk to every member about what they might want different out of this experience. And so I really credit staff with trusting me to make a lot of changes so quickly outside of that annual conference. And so that then just set the tone, because I'm sure you might remember 5 months after that, COVID hit. So then we already had a cadence of, we're going to act fast, we're going to try things, we're going to see how they go, we're going to take smart risks. And so we were ready to kind of take advantage of that, crisis, for lack of a better word. And then that's kind of been our operating mode since then.
I think that's so great. And when you said, like, should we decide to do this after the conference? I've worked in associations for many, many years, and that would have been the standard line. Like, we won't touch anything yet. So again, I'm just loving this, like, whole new way of thinking about it.
it was just really interesting as somebody who had been at AMLE for a while. And like you said, it's always that there's always an excuse not to start, something. And, we'll wait till after the conference, we'll wait till after the holiday, we'll wait till the new year, whatever it might be. And to Stephanie's credit, like, she came in and I think a lot of associations are like us in that they have a, successful conference location, and, they always do better here. So ours is Nashville. Nashville's very drivable. It always does well. And that's where we were in 2019. And I feel like we could have, sat back and said, we know the conference is going to do pretty good. And we'll be, okay after that, and we can wait. But instead of just letting it be pretty good, like, we went in and kind of negotiated, some things that made it better for us with the hotel. We, kind of looked at some of the contracts we had in place and, whether those made sense or not, and just, address things right away. So yeah, it was like we could have waited and probably been okay, but instead of, probably being okay, she made sure that, we were better than okay. So
Yeah, I think that's great.
And it was a good, I think my advice is obviously not everybody's going to be set up with that same situation, but find that galvanizing moment, because we got the board involved. Hey, can you call 10 schools and get them to bring an educator, help us launch this new innovation program. And so it gave us some energy, that little kick in the caboose that we needed to get the board re-excited about what we were planning to do.
I think that's great. And I think that this, as we just talked about it, this could be the rut that you didn't fall into that other associations do. So I feel like your story is going to be resonating with a lot of, smaller staffed associations. So how did you prioritize what to tackle first? And what leadership lessons did you learn about managing change sort of in this environment?
Yeah. So I feel like, we got through the conference in 2019 in early November, and then immediately began looking at, tackling our 2020 budget. We had to get it turned around for, our finance and audit committee to review, our board to approve. And, we had looked at things and looked at staffing. And I think we were in a very common position for associations in that our staff was small at that time. I think we had 8 to 10 people, but we were structured for, an older association model. We had people on staff that were doing jobs that, weren't necessarily modern things that, associations needed. So, we had made the decision, we're going to have to, over the next 12 months, make some cuts here. We're going to have to hire in some expertise here. We've got this outsourced. It's a core competency. We need to bring that back in-house with a staff member versus a consultant. And it sat down and mapped out all these changes that we wanted to do in 2020. Little did we know, like Stephanie said, 4 or 5 months later, COVID was going to hit. So that, actually helped us expedite those changes that we were planning on doing over 12 months. We had to do them to, maintain, financial stability. So we kind of leveraged that situation a little bit to make the most of a bad, situation and take that, and turn that into an opportunity, which is kind of what Stephanie and I's presentation on ASAE was about, is leveraging those situations. So I think it was all just about modernizing our staff and, taking advantage of, we had some core competencies outsourced, but we had some things that we were doing in-house that we could outsource, that things such as like book publishing, editing, graphic design, things like that, there's, a whole nother, element outside now that we can, use, other services for. So we sat down and mapped that out and just, we're going to make it happen, but we're able to make it happen faster and, do the best we could in 2020.
And you had mentioned prioritization, and that was an initial decision we made. Every association, I'm sure, has some version of this, but we have lots of audiences: teachers, principals, assistant principals, superintendents, counselors. And we made a really intentional decision that we were going to focus on principals. And it's not because we don't care about teachers. We care deeply about middle school teachers, but we knew we were going to have the most impact if we were helping that top leadership role, because then that would give them more capacity to to meet the needs of their teachers, et cetera. And we also knew that we had limited capacity. So if we're going to try to meet the needs of all of those constituencies, we're not going to do it properly. We're not going to do it effectively. So we made a really intentional decision to focus in at that leadership role and to know that the benefits would trickle down to our other stakeholders.
I love that, because as a communications person, I love when people say, like, who are our audiences? Because it's not, unless you have millions of dollars to be able to communicate to every type of audience, you have to become strategic to figure out, well, first, who are our audiences? And then what is the message that can resonate with all of them? So, I love hearing that. That always makes me happy. So you talked about rebuilding trust with your members and your volunteers and partners. And that is not always easy. I definitely feel that. So, what strategies helped with you to re-engage that core community? Because you did just list, all of those different member audiences. So, what did you do to help them not drift away?
Yeah, I think it was really important when I started. Obviously, we were moving quickly on that conference, but at the same time, I was doing a listening tour of members, not just members, but I was really intentional also to reach out to lapsed members that may have previously been in our tent and over the years had just not found that same value. And the message wasn't just, I want to hear from you, it was, I'm going to ask you for something because I wanted to give them back that sense of professional pride that they had previously found in AMLE. And again, it was still focused on our principal's audience. So I would ask, for example, there were two professors I reached out to, and I said, I need you to help me redo our core positional paper because our school leaders need this desperately right now. They need this text updated. And that, gave them, again, something that they could take professional pride in giving back to our association, but kept us laser focused on the strategic goals of rebuilding our value for that school leader position. And so those conversations went really well because one, obviously we were listening empathetically, but they knew that we were going to actually take the insights that they were giving us and act on them.
I think that's such a great idea. It's like almost counterintuitive that you weren't just going to listen, but you were going to ask for something. That's kind of, you know, a very new piece of information, I feel like, for our listeners to, when you said listening tour, I thought, okay, great. And even talking to lapsed members, like I don't know if all CEOs are out there doing that, but I do love the fact that you asked for something, and you're right with how that would go.
Yeah, it's literally like that, old adage, like how to make a friend really quickly. You just ask them for a small favor, and then they say yes, and then you just build on it from there. Was kind of the strategy I think Stephanie took, and it just worked really, really well. And it's just amazing how much our group. And I don't think they're unique. I mean, they're unique in one aspect, but not in a human aspect. In that they just want to contribute, and they're looking for that belonging. And that's why they're part of an association to begin with. So, if you give them, a way to volunteer or, be involved even more, they're so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a strategy, obviously, but it was authentic. We really wanted them back and contributing. So just to
Yeah.
add that, I wasn't trying to trick them into
No,
coming.
I
We
think,
really needed their support.
yeah, it's like it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Which again, Derek, to what you just said, it is about being part of a community and feeling that way. And that is the reason people belong to associations. And the reason I've spent most of my life in associations is because I do like that. So I love that. Um, so through all of this change, how did you stay grounded in your mission? And how did you ensure these new initiatives like and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it, middleschool.org, or your recognition program. Like, how did that stay aligned with your commitment to the middle level education?
Yeah, I think Stephanie hinted at it a little bit. When we got started, she had reached out to a couple professors to, help us rewrite our main position paper, which was called "This We Believe." We made the first strategic decision was to change the name of that and call it "Successful Middle School: This We Believe." And we essentially used that as a foundational document. I mean, it was the association's foundational document, but we used it as a foundational document for all of our programs and practices and resources. So we, decided we were going to, Stephanie can talk more about our school recognition program, but build out an assessment based on that. And then based on those assessment results, like now, how can we recognize these schools that are doing really well in this assessment? We've got, resource pages built out around, the things that make unique things that are unique in middle schools. We've got, companion resources. So we have a whole successful middle school line of books that we do. So it was really that it really did ground us in everything we look at. How does it fit in the successful middle school model? And, it really helped frame, if it doesn't fit, maybe it's not a core middle school initiative. And, along the way, we maybe had a few stumbling blocks where we, got outside of that. And when we did get outside of that, we weren't as successful. So it's, really been that, thing we can take a look at and say, okay, how does it fit? If it fits, great. If not, maybe it's not for us. Maybe it's more general education. So
Yeah, and Derek mentioned the name change, which was actually more strategically important than he alluded to, because if you Google This We Believe, you might be directed to certain churches or evangelical movements and not the middle school model. And so that was actually a hard conversation because for 40 plus years, it was called This We Believe. So there was a deep emotional attachment to that name. And I think that that's something as association professionals, we can't touch the name. We can't touch it. We can't do that. We couldn't possibly do that. Joe Schmo from 40 years ago will be upset if we do that. You just have to do it because you know what's in the best interests of your association. And so we kept it as the second part of the title. So the program is all Successful Middle School Program, but there's still that ode to, This We Believe that's on the title of the text. So, I think there's almost always a creative way to make sure that we're respectful and honoring the contributions of our past members while looking forward for the association. And then the other thing that I'd mention is that we had pretty generic, the typical core values that an organization does: trust, transparency, whatever it might be. We actually changed the actual core values of the association to be that we believe in education for every young adolescent should be equitable, responsive, challenge, straight from that book. And so it really gave us, again, something to coalesce around, but just an anchor that everything is going to be laser focused on this text.
And make us unique. So, which I think that's one of the biggest challenges for associations is, there's, 100 education associations. Why AMLE? And it is what makes us unique.
Yeah, I really like that. You've also stepped into the bigger national voice around policy, especially through your national policy agenda for the middle grades. And how has advocacy become part of your long-term strategy, and what opportunities has it created?
Yeah, I would say that we have had to be really creative in this space because we don't have a lot of money to hire lobbyists or to, have massive hill days. So we've had to think about how we can make an impact here and to bring a voice to the conversation that represents middle schools and middle school educators while also being budget conscious. And so we created that national policy agenda for the middle grades to have kind of a unified voice on what this space needs. But we also simultaneously created a communication campaign that aligned with it. And what we realized when we were doing all of our stakeholder interviews was we kept hearing the lack of attention, respect, funding, whatever it is for the middle school days, because people reflected on their own middle school experience and thought how awkward and terrible or whatever it might have been. And so we said, we've got a PR problem. And so in addition to launching the policy agenda, at the same time, we launched our Flip the Script campaign about rethinking about middle school. Instead of this terrible time that we just have to survive, it is this amazing opportunity that we cannot let go. We have to make sure we're grabbing kids at that time and engaging them in school and in their future, thinking about their futures. So I think those two things gave members something to be really excited and energized around. And then in terms of, stretching the budget, it gave us something to approach partners with. And so we've had really great partnerships. For example, one of the tenets of our policy agenda is around career exploration. And so we've got a great partnership with American Student Assistance, who has a lot more funding, deeper pockets, better, legislative relationships. And so that's helped us actually make an impact there. But without having a statement, a position, that policy agenda, and then a communication campaign around it, I don't think those partnerships would have come as easily.
I love that. And I think that, you end up with a lot of associations who say, hiring a lobbyist firm is an expensive endeavor. And a lot of times you hear that we've only had one fly-in day and that's your whole entire advocacy plan. Where I think this is being so creative, and thinking outside of the association box, if you will, that not only partnerships, but to have drilled down and still to have created the national policy agenda for middle schools, or for middle grades, that once you had that, you took the next step as opposed to vice versa. I feel like sometimes the trajectory is like, well, we'll hire the firm, and then we'll figure out our policy. And I think that this is such a great, you know, reminder to our members out there who do not have the funding for that type of advocacy, that you could still have a place. And then the fact that you got creative and had these partnerships. So I feel like that's, that's just great for our listeners to hear. Looking back, what surprised you most, whether about your members or the organization or even yourselves as leaders?
I would say it's basically just the passion behind our members. And, everybody knows that teachers and educators don't necessarily go into this profession for the money. They go into it, because it's what they love, it's what they believe. And I knew that, but I didn't realize exactly how passionate middle school teachers in particular were, and how willing they were to help out. And just like you were talking about with, the policy agenda, like we didn't go out and hire a national firm. We, got a group together and said, what are the biggest things? And, they came at it from a completely different angle. Like Stephanie said, of, here's the negative, viewpoint. Like, let's flip that script. Let's make this, a positive thing, and, show our profession in a, positive light versus, maybe whatever would have came out of, whatever generic policy committee might have been formed if we had hired a firm. But their level of expertise about their field, their passion for the work that they do, teachers, I think, sometimes can get a bad rap in the media or, the community in general, but they are all in it for the right reasons. And like they show that every day to us with what they commit to the association. So that was, just amazing to see. And then also just in general, like what can be done if you just make a commitment to do something. We, had talked about, we need to do this or we need to do that. And let's form a committee to talk about it. Let's do that. And just, what action can, once you get going, just getting that ball rolling, how fast you can make a change. But just taking that first step made everything that we did possible. And, now we're this massive, we were a little pebble. Now we're this massive stone just rolling in the right direction. Everybody's reaching out. They want to partner with us. They want to be part of AMLE. They want to engage with us. And just how quickly that can happen if you take those first steps.
I would add to that something I have continued to do is that I spend a lot of time actually in schools, even though I'm not, by background, I'm not an educator. I have a law degree. Like that was middle school is not my space, but, and when you walk into a middle school, it's, you immediately know where you are because of the odor of the amazing children that are just getting out of gym class. But I say that there's just this energy there, and just spending time with our members, shadowing teachers, having a principal show you around, watching kids, do their thing. It wasn't necessarily a core component of my job, but it is the most important thing that I have ever done. We have a funny saying on our team that if Derek hates something, our members will love it. Because he's like he said, he's not a middle school teacher, but he's an association professional. And you just have to get outside of we spend so much time on our computers or in our offices, and spend time with your members and just really get to know them. It has completely transformed our communication style, our social media voice, because we weren't approachable. We were that corporate, the core values that didn't resonate with anybody because they were so generic. And we've had a lot of fun with our members, just getting that, at speaking their language and doing fun things like around middle school slang or whatever it might be. So obviously that's unique to middle school, but there's an applicable, version of that for every association, I think.
That's great. And you're right about the slang. Oh my goodness. I feel like my own daughter has a language that I do not speak.
And as soon as you know what it means, it's out.
I know. It's very true. So at ASAE, your session was called Transforming Challenges into Opportunities. And my colleague Colleen saw it and was just amazed and loved your presentation. So what's the big idea that you think your experience represents for the broader association community as we head into the new year?
Yeah, I would say that challenge to opportunity, there are so many challenges or things that are kind of worrying association professionals right now, whether it's shifts at the federal level in terms of legislative priorities or funding, if it's AI and how it's going to impact both our members and our operations, or it's what's going to happen with the economy. If you just change your perspective to think these are all not things to be scared of, but instead they're massive opportunities, if we can get ahead of them and understand them and play around with them and test out how we might be able to be a source of value for our members as they're thinking about these issues. I think that just that frame of thinking will be really helpful as we look at what the future of associations looks like.
Yeah, and I think it's knowing that everybody right now, 2026 is going to be unique in the fact that I think everybody is going through challenges. It's how can we work together? Who can we partner with to be the best for middle level education? And then also, what strategic decisions can we make for our association? If we've been hearing things like, hotel bookings are down or nobody's booking space for future years. Like, how can we transform that into an opportunity for AMLE to, maybe we look at signing contracts another year or two out farther than we would because we know that, hotels and convention centers and things like that are, struggling. So we can help out their community by, booking, but also help us out by getting a better deal. Where are those strategic opportunities to advance the association in a downtime or a down economy, and lock in some pretty profitable contracts so that regardless of what 28, 29, 30 looks like, we're set up in a good spot.
I love these answers because for the first time, I feel like this is a very positive message. You hear all that, that's going on in the world, and you could just sort of be in the doldrums and join everyone else there. So I love that this is more, let's not think of it that way. Let's think of it as the opportunity and book the conference somewhere else. And I just feel like it's refreshing to hear something positive. So my final question is we definitely have listeners today who are facing their own version of a turnaround. And what's one piece of advice you'd give them to start moving forward today?
I think it's maybe oversimplifying it, but it is just that, take action and do something. Stephanie and I laid out our presentation. One of the things we looked back on that I don't know if was necessarily intentional, but we noticed a trend is, everything doesn't require a long study. We know, like, our members are vocal, we're interacting with them on a daily basis. I've been at AMLE for 17 years now. Stephanie's been at AMLE for 7 years now. We know in general what the association needs. And if we have a strong feeling that, we can make a, impact quickly by doing something, like, we don't need to wait, a couple years for a committee to push it through. It's just, actually just taking that action and doing it. One thing you had talked about earlier that I don't think we actually replied to was middleschool.org. So that is something that, for years, we had these old pamphlets that we did that were called How to Enjoy Living with a Pre-Adolescent. So HELP, so help. So it's help for middle schools. And they were like, animated little brochures, and we sell them in packs of 50 and give them to schools will buy them. They hand them out to parents. This is what your kid's going through. They just got so outdated that we decided we'd stop selling them, but they were always a great resource, not necessarily for our core audience, but for our core audience's audience. So we went without those for a few years and said, okay, we really need to re-envision this. We need some resources for parents. So we decided to develop middleschool.org, which is a series of articles on, anything and everything your parents are going through that we can keep up to date. It's not just a print brochure. And then we developed the print brochure to go along with that called Embracing the Change, Middle School 101 for Families. And basically it's, the high level, and then, directs them to middleschool.org for the updated information. So as the latest research comes out, it's there, and then we've got articles for parents on that. That's something we knew we needed to do. We could have, taken years to develop it, but, we said, let's make this happen and just did it. So it's, having that faith that understand your membership and just, take that leap and get going, because once you get rolling, it's kind of hard to stop.
And I would just add to that. So that site includes explainer videos for parents. It includes book recommendations, a print brochure, articles. And I think the point of that is it is not an excuse to say I don't have enough staff to have video content or to have whatever it might be. That there are a plethora of vendors, resources, software, whatever is out there. So if you don't have multiple access points for your members, then you're missing a big opportunity, even if you have a small staff, I would say.
Well, I'm definitely going to be checking that out because I like the idea that there are resources for parents because that's, not as readily, I guess, available. So that's good to know. This has been such a great discussion, and we end each podcast with a series of, sort of rapid fire questions so our audience can get to know you both. So, have you had a chance to travel anywhere fun recently?
So I did get to go to Scotland and Ireland a couple months ago, which was amazing. One of the most beautiful places on earth. And then I will say that last week I was in San Diego, which, we used to have a conference there every year. And we're looking at, like I said, what can we do as an association right now with 2026 being, so uncertain. So we visited San Diego. It was always a great spot for us. And, it is a beautiful city that we're looking to book for future years. So it was nice to get out there again. It's one of my favorite places.
Nice.
Last month, I went to New York City with my husband because we're trying to hit all the ballparks. And so we did a Yankees and a Mets game back to back. And that was really fun.
That is nice. I am married to somebody who we keep going from baseball stadium to baseball stadium. Last year, we got to go to Pittsburgh. We hadn't seen that. And then this year, we're going to Cleveland.
Nice.
Yes. So what podcasts are you listening to right now that you'd recommend?
I've been a This American Life junkie forever, so I'll always recommend that one.
And I am very boring in the fact that I literally just love listening to TED Talks. So the TED Talks daily. It's probably a very common one. Nothing exciting there, but it's very motivational.
Nice. What's one place in the United States that you've never been to but would love to go?
This year, our Schools of Distinction program recognized its first Alaskan school. And so now that's on my radar that I'm probably in May, not right now, but I'd love to visit.
Yeah. And it's just so funny, like as we work with all of our members, as an international association and get to know them, I've never been out to like Montana area, like Idaho, the Dakotas, things like that, but just, getting to interact with them and see pictures from, their families and getting to know them, just how beautiful that area of the country is. Like, would absolutely love to get out there and, make that journey at some point in the near future.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. And last, finish the sentence. When you see me looking at my phone, it probably means that I'm
checking email.
It is so, like, you've probably seen me like on this camera, like constantly looking, like I have an addiction. I need to clear every notice. So, and it's sadly, very boringly, always email or a random text message, but I need to get it off my phone right away or it will drive me crazy. So I wish it was more fun, but yeah.
Well, Stephanie and Derek, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation and I know that our listeners will as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share our story.
That's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights Podcast, previously known as the Association 100 Podcast, is a production of Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a bi-monthly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words and wisdom from the trenches of association life? We want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupward.com. That's info@onwardupward.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association insights and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in.